Ridgewater, once a peaceful and tight-knit town, had become a shadow of its former self. Nestled in the heart of rural America, the streets were lined with charming shops and friendly faces. At least, that was how it used to be. Over the past year, the presence of the Black Vultures, a ruthless biker gang, had transformed Ridgewater into a town gripped by fear. They prowled the streets on their roaring motorcycles, demanding protection fees from local businesses and threatening anyone who dared to stand up to them. The once bustling town square now felt eerily empty, as residents avoided drawing attention to themselves. Jack Carter, a decorated Army veteran, had returned to Ridgewater hoping for a quiet life. After 2 decades of service, he had envisioned peace, a chance to run his auto repair shop, spend time with his sister Laura and her son Toby, and leave the battles of his past behind. But Ridgewater's descent into chaos weighed on Jack. He had seen the fear in his customers' eyes and heard the whispers about businesses being forced to close under the gang's relentless pressure. Still, he tried to stay out of it, convincing himself that it wasn't his fight. That changed the night the Black Vultures came to Jack's shop. It was just after closing when they rolled in, their engines echoing off the nearby buildings. Their leader, a towering man named Dagger, strode into the shop, flanked by 2 enforcers. Jack knew immediately what they wanted. Protection money, the same scheme they had used to bleed other businesses dry. "We're here to make sure your shop stays safe," Dagger said, his voice low and menacing. "All it'll take is a small monthly fee." Jack's jaw tightened. He had faced far more dangerous men than Dagger in his years overseas, but there was something about the gang leader's smugness that set his blood boiling. "No thanks," Jack replied evenly. "I can take care of myself." Dagger's smirk faded, replaced by a warning glare. "Suit yourself," he said before turning to leave. "But don't say we didn't give you a chance." The next morning, Jack found his shop in ruins. Windows shattered, equipment destroyed, and spray-painted threats scrawled across the walls. The message was clear: pay up or face worse. As Jack surveyed the damage, something inside him shifted. This wasn't just about his shop anymore. It was about Ridgewater. The Black Vultures had taken enough, and Jack decided it was time someone fought back. For the first time in months, his military instincts kicked in. Ridgewater might not be a battlefield, but Jack was ready to treat it like one. Jack stood amidst the wreckage of his auto shop, the acrid smell of burnt rubber and gasoline filling the air. His heart raced, not with fear, but with a simmering anger he hadn't felt in years. Memories of battlefields overseas flooded his mind, places where fear was a weapon, and men like Dagger used intimidation to control others. He'd fought against worse, and he wasn't about to let a gang of leather-clad bullies destroy the life he had built. A town in fear. Later that day, Jack visited a few neighboring businesses to gauge how widespread the gang's reach had become. At the Ridgewater Diner, where he often grabbed coffee, he spoke with Martha, the elderly owner who had run the place for decades. "They came last week," Martha admitted, her voice trembling as she wiped down the counter. "Said I needed to pay them every month or they'd smash the windows. I can barely make ends meet as it is." Jack clenched his fists under the table. "Why hasn't anyone gone to the sheriff?" Martha shook her head. "You think he doesn't know? Either he's scared of them or in on it. Nobody's going to save us, Jack." The words hit hard. Jack had returned to Ridgewater, hoping to leave the battles of his past behind. But it was becoming clear that this was a fight the town couldn't win on its own. If no one else would step up, maybe it was time for him to do so. Preparing to fight back. That evening, Jack called Ben, a retired police officer and an old friend. Over beers at Jack's kitchen table, he explained what had happened. "These guys have the whole town under their thumb," Jack said. "I can't just stand by and watch them tear everything apart." Ben nodded, his expression grim. "They've been at this for months. Extortion, illegal gambling, drug running, you name it. But they're organized, Jack. This isn't just some rowdy biker club." Jack leaned back, his mind already formulating a plan. "Then we fight them on our terms. They think they own this town, but they've never faced someone who fights back." Building an alliance. Jack and Ben began reaching out to trusted friends in the community. They found allies in unexpected places. Carlos, a mechanic who had worked alongside Jack. Maggie, a no-nonsense bar owner who had endured her own run-ins with the gang, and even a few fellow veterans who were more than willing to lend their skills. Under the cover of night, the group met in Jack's shop, now cleared of debris but still bearing the scars of the gang's attack. They discussed strategies, shared intelligence, and began to form a plan. Jack's military training became invaluable as he taught them basic tactics, including surveillance, communication, and how to disable the gang's operations without putting themselves in harm's way. Sending a message. The group's first act of resistance was small but symbolic. They targeted the gang's bikes, which were parked outside their local hangout, a rundown bar on the edge of town. Jack and Carlos disabled the engines and slashed the tires, leaving a spray-painted message on the wall. Ridgewater fights back. The next morning, the gang found their bikes out of commission and their hideout marked. Dagger, furious, ordered his men to double down on their intimidation tactics. The gang began targeting anyone they suspected of involvement, breaking windows, issuing threats, and stalking residents. Jack knew retaliation was inevitable, but he was ready. The gang strikes back. One evening, Laura called Jack in a panic. "Toby saw one of the bikers outside the house," she said, her voice shaking. "They didn't do anything, but they're watching us." Jack's jaw tightened. This was the line he couldn't let them cross. He told Laura to pack a bag and bring Toby to his place. As they arrived, Jack met them at the door, his rifle slung over his shoulder. "They're not going to touch you," Jack said firmly. "I'll make sure of it." The gang's threats escalated further when they vandalized the Ridgewater diner, smashing its windows and spray-painting warnings on the walls. Jack and his group worked quickly to repair the damage, their solidarity strengthening as the gang's intimidation grew. Uncovering corruption. Through Ben's contacts, they uncovered the depth of the sheriff's involvement. He wasn't just complicit, he was actively aiding the gang, taking bribes to look the other way. Armed with this information, Jack knew they couldn't rely on the law to protect them. They needed to expose the corruption and take down the gang themselves. The group gathered evidence, including photographs, witness testimonies, and even a recorded conversation between the sheriff and one of the gang members. Jack planned to leak the evidence to the press, ensuring it reached beyond Ridgewater and couldn't be buried. The turning point. The gang's compound, located just outside town, was both their headquarters and the hub for their illegal activities. Jack's team began planning a bold move to dismantle the gang's operations entirely. "We hit them where it hurts," Jack explained during a late-night strategy meeting. "Their money, their bikes, and their control over the town. We take it all away." The plan was risky but precise. They would cut off the gang's power by sabotaging their supply routes and destroying their stockpiles of illegal goods. Ben, with his knowledge of law enforcement, coordinated anonymous tips to federal agencies about the gang's activities, setting the stage for a raid. The night of action. The night of the operation, Jack led the group to the gang's compound. They moved stealthily, disabling vehicles, cutting communications, and setting fire to the stockpiles. Jack and Ben kept watch, ensuring the team avoided direct confrontation. When the gang realized they were under attack, chaos erupted. Dagger and his men scrambled to defend their compound, but the damage had already been done. Jack's team retreated just as sirens filled the air. Federal agents, tipped off by Ben's intel, arrived to dismantle the gang once and for all. The early morning light broke over Ridgewater as the dust settled from the night's chaos. The Black Vulture's compound was in shambles, their illegal operations dismantled, and their leader, Dagger, arrested alongside several gang members. For the first time in over a year, Ridgewater felt like it could finally breathe again. Jack Carter stood outside his shop, watching as townspeople gathered to take in the news. Many were still cautious, unsure if the gang's grip had truly been broken, but there was also a growing sense of relief. Jack, however, felt a mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. The battle was over, but the scars, both physical and emotional, remained. The town reclaims its strength. In the days that followed, Ridgewater began to rebuild. Businesses reopened their doors without fear of extortion. Families returned to the streets, and the community came together to repair the damage left behind. Jack's shop became a hub of activity, not just for car repairs, but as a gathering place where people shared stories and offered gratitude. "Jack, you saved this town," Martha said one afternoon as she brought him a plate of homemade cookies. "We couldn't have done it without you." Jack shook his head. "I didn't do it alone. It was all of us standing up together." The federal agents who had taken down the gang credited the evidence Jack and his team had gathered, which also exposed the corrupt sheriff. The law enforcement vacuum left behind was quickly filled by an interim officer from the state, someone determined to restore trust in Ridgewater's police force. Jack's reflection. For Jack, the victory wasn't without cost. The operation had dredged up memories of his time in combat, and he often found himself replaying the events in his mind. But there was a key difference this time. Instead of fighting in a foreign land for abstract ideals, he had fought to protect his home and the people he cared about. Laura and Toby, now safe and thriving, became a symbol of the life Jack wanted to protect. One evening, as they sat on his porch, Toby asked, "Uncle Jack, does this mean the bad guys are gone for good?" Jack smiled, ruffling Toby's hair. "For now, buddy, but we'll always stand up to them if they come back." A new purpose. As Ridgewater began to heal, Jack found himself stepping into a new role. He helped organize a community watch program and mentored local youth, including Toby, teaching them skills in discipline and resilience. While Jack knew he couldn't erase the past, he had found a way to channel his experiences into something meaningful. For the first time in years, Jack felt a sense of peace. Ridgewater was more than just a town. It was his home, and for that, he would always be willing to fight.